You're listening to Being Autistic. I'm your host, Shelly, and I am a 50-year-old woman sharing my experiences about what it's like to grow up knowing I was different but not knowing why, how I learned I was on the autism spectrum, and what it's like to be autistic. Hello, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Being Autistic podcast. So this episode is going to be called The Teenage Years for an Undiagnosed Autistic Girl. I have already done an episode on what it was like to be a child. So check out Undiagnosed Autistic Girl in Childhood. That was my previous episode. So moving along in order here, I figured I would cover each section of my life because each one of them comes with different problems and challenges and experiences. So in this one, I'm going to cover at least 4 major categories of what happens when you become a teenager. So that would be starting to date people or not, high school courses, well, I should say classes, extracurricular activities that people do in high school. Basically, the whole, how do you do in high school with grades and classes and other things like that. And then I'm also going to talk about friendships in high school. And the last subject was getting my first job as a teenager. And I'm probably going to ramble a little bit like I usually do, and I might go down rabbit holes. I might realize there's something I forgot to write down, but those are the 4 areas I'm going to start with. So let's start with dating. I literally did not date at all until I was 26 years old. So I could end this section now because I literally don't have any experience with it. However, I will talk a little bit about it because I realize that most people do date. They start dating in high school. But for an autistic, undiagnosed person, this is what it was like. I first, let's just start with maybe attraction. I was still attracted to people on a certain level, but not really, like I had no interest in having sex, none. And what I'm realizing now is what I think attraction is for autistic people, or specifically me, I should say, because everybody's different. But for me, attraction was all about needing to look at pretty things. And it comes along with a sensory thing, like, you want all of your senses to be pleasurable. You don't want anything that's going to feel uncomfortable or make you irritated or things like that. So the sense of sight was a big one for me because when I looked at pretty things like colors, they made me feel better, and that also went along with people. So when I saw a cute guy, well, in this case, a cute boy, I liked to look at him. I wanted to talk to him. And that was my version of exploring attraction. So I didn't go on dates, but I hung out sometimes with some boys that were, I can go into this story now since we're on the subject. This is the closest that I ever did to dating in high school. I was 16 years old. And I had a couple friends, which I'm going to go further in depth with the friends thing, but I don't know if they were real friends, but let's just say they're my friends. And I hung out with them, and one of them had a neighbor boy that I thought was just so adorable. He was so cute, and I just wanted to be near him, and I wanted him to like me. Because, even autistic people, they want people to like them, even if they're not ready to do sexual things with them. So in my case, I just wanted to hang out with this boy and I wanted him to like me. I would have dated him if he would have showed interest in me, but he didn't. He was interested in my friend, and so we were playing a game of truth or dare, as you do when you're a teenager and you're learning how to kiss for the first time. So he was my second kiss because another boy that was his friend was playing with us too, and unfortunately I had to kiss him first. So that experience was just like average, because of course I wanted to know what it was like to kiss somebody, but I didn't want to kiss that boy. So of course I was able to kiss the boy that I had a crush on, and I think this makes it sound so awful, but like he said that he would only kiss me if he could kiss my friend, the other girl, instead. Not instead, but along with, like afterwards, whatever. So at the time, you just want to do things you want to do. I wasn't really concerned with how that hurt me emotionally, but whatever. And so I did it, and it was great. And that was my extent of kissing in high school. And I think that might have been the only time that I ever kissed any boys in high school. Honestly, well, actually, I have a side note here. That boy and girl ended up dating, having children, and being married, and they're still married today. So that was a good ending for them, not so much for me. But yeah, it was just all I could get. And I mean, that experience was kind of like what fueled my imagination. Autistic people are very imaginative because sometimes we have to create worlds in our minds to escape from the real world that we can't fit into and don't feel comfortable in. And so I use that experience, what it felt like to kiss somebody. I use that a lot in my imagination. And yeah, there's really nowhere else I can go with this topic right now, because that was the extent of me and the dating thing or kissing thing. I didn't kiss another guy until I was 26. And that's when I had my second date as well. First date, actually. So I did have a couple of boys that I was friends with in high school. And these were friends that I kind of hung out with as a child as well. Not child, but maybe like 11 or 12, 13, leading into teenage years. And then I kind of still talk to them as a teenager, but like anybody else, they slowly drifted out of my life. I had a crush on another boy that was, we were probably 14, 15 years old. Or maybe younger than that. Like 13, 14, 12, whatever. And that's around the time when I realized that the type of boys that I really liked were boys that I could be friends with. And let's just face facts here. Boys and men, guys, whatever, they generally don't want to be friends with a girl that they find attractive. They want to date them. Or if they are just friends with them, it's because they're not attracted to them. In my case, this other boy that I had a crush on was gay, and I did not know it. And that would explain why we were friends, because, gay boys, gay guys have an easy time being friends with girls. And as an autistic girl, I wanted to be friends with guys. It made me feel more comfortable. It was actually more natural to talk to guys than it was to talk to girls. And that's a steady theme in autistic people that I've heard many times, that girls have an easier time being friends with guys. Because I don't know if it's because a lot of autistic guys are just more open and easier to get along with, or the whole thing with guys being gay and being really good friends with women, that makes you feel safe. Because as someone who was not into sex, because I don't even know how to explain how I felt about sex. I didn't have the opportunity to do it, for one thing, but at the same time, when I saw my friends that were hooking up with guys, it just made me feel like something was wrong with me, that I didn't want that. And that did trickle into my adulthood as well. I didn't pursue it at all. I let it happen when it happened, and I'll get to that in probably my next episode, where I'm going to talk about more adulthood issues. But for now, I'm going to stick to the teenage ones. So yeah, I pretty much didn't do a whole lot when it came to dating. And I think now that would be a good time to end that category. So, what was it like for me going through high school, taking high school classes, extracurricular activities, and things like that? I pretty much was drifting through, doing the bare minimum. And this is how it was in elementary school as well. I didn't want to do homework. I failed at math. I got F's and D's in it. And I was pretty good at grammar, which was the only subject that's ever been good for me. Kind of came naturally because I did a lot of reading. So I did not do any extracurricular activities. I do remember one of my high school friends joining the dance line, which was the girls that danced during the football games and stuff. And I went with her to a few practices to watch, and I just felt so left out, but because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to take part in these things with groups of people. I just, I wanted to want to. In fact, I think I even went to the sign-up meeting where they went to sign up. And when I got there, I was just like, no, this doesn't feel right for me. So my two friends signed up, or maybe just one of them. But that was just a really good example of how I didn't have any interest in doing any more things that had to do with school, because I really just wanted to not do schoolwork. I didn't want to be around school kids other than my friends that I felt pretty comfortable with. So yeah, another example of another category where I didn't get myself involved. I just skated by and did the bare minimum, didn't want to be there, didn't enjoy it, was not for me. So a lot of autistic people probably did take extracurricular activities because there's the whole special interest thing where if you are really interested in a subject, you will break out of your shell when it comes to that subject and talk to people about it. And at the time, I was not aware. Actually, I was too socially inept to do these things, but I know that there were some extracurricular activities that I would have liked, such as photography, working on the yearbook meetings, whatever, to arrange the pictures and stuff, make the book. I probably would have liked that because I love photography, but I didn't love it at the time. I didn't start getting into photography until I was in my 30s or even early 40s. So I feel like this is a theme when it comes to autistic kids, that we don't really know what we want. We don't know what our hobbies and interests are, or at least what they're going to be in the future, to prepare, because usually high school is to prepare you for the future. And a lot of these extracurricular activities were there to help you, become a better adult and learn how to be an adult and learn some skills that can help you in adulthood. And, being an autistic person, I felt like I was barely able to get down the skills to be a child. So I was certainly not ready to learn how to be an adult. And there were a lot of classes in high school designed for this, like to prepare you for college. And everybody probably remembers having to choose electives in high school. And that was a horrible experience for me, not only because it was like, I have to make decisions. I have to think about my future. No, I want the same thing I've always wanted. I just want to get off school and go home and listen to my music and ride my bike and swing and play outside. I still wanted to do those things as a teenager. So when it came to choosing electives, I don't remember what most of them were, but one of them was typing. And this really dates me because typing is not even a thing anymore. I don't think they teach that in school. You probably have to take special admin courses in a college to learn how to type. I think it's actually called keyboarding now, but at the time it was called basic typing. And we typed on a typewriter. If you're younger than the age of 20, you probably have no idea what a typewriter is. But I actually had a typewriter as a child. My aunt gave me one when I was 10, and I was practicing on that for the longest time. And then when I got in high school and I'm like, oh, you can take a course on how to type. I keep saying course, but I mean class. I'm just used to the word course now that I'm taking courses on the computer. But anyway, I was taking that typing class and learned how to type really, really fast. In fact, when my friends saw me typing, they were just in awe at how fast I was at it. And as a side note, a lot of autistic people really thrive on the computer, on the internet, because this is where we find our people. This is where we can talk to others that have things in common with us or the like, So I was really good at using computers and typing and all that internet stuff. Still am. And so, yeah, that typing class really helped me. And so that's my preferred method of communication, is typing emails or typing messages on Facebook. But I'm really not into using technology otherwise, like phones. I don't like phones. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'm going to stop now. So basically, to sum that up, the only thing that I really got out of high school was learning how to type and learning how to do proper grammar. So that helped for my future as well, because I did go on to have a couple websites, when I still do have a website. But yeah, other than those things, I really didn't have any interest in activities or high school classes or high school in general. I still didn't get much out of it at all, and I can't remember anything I learned, because let's face it, if you're not interested in a subject as an autistic person, you're not going to remember it. I spent so many of my classes in high school writing notes to my friends, like if my teachers only knew. So now that's a good segue into the next category of friends. So I have mentioned a couple of my friends that I hung out with. The girl that ended up with the boy that I liked, and then there was another girl that was probably my best friend. So what was it like being undiagnosed with those girls? So like I said, autistic girls tend to gravitate towards being friends with boys. They don't really have great experiences with girls, and that's always been my case. Like, if you listen to my other episode about being in childhood, I lost at least 2 best friend girls because they just didn't want to hang out with me anymore after so many years. And the same happened with my high school friends. Of course, a lot of people lose friends after high school. That's kind of natural, but I guess maybe because I lost those other friends in childhood, that I feel like that's just what's always is going to happen with me with girls. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about with these friends was why I mentioned earlier that I'm not quite sure if they were real friends. I mean, I think they were, but how good of a friend can you really be in your teenage years? You're really just a selfish person just trying to get through life and be accepted. And you don't really like people for them as a person. That's something that doesn't come until later in life. So we were friends because we got put on the same table in art class. And we liked the same music. And that's all it takes when you're a child or a teenager. It doesn't take much to become friends. It's just that an autistic person, it's harder to make friends, of course, and it's also harder to keep them. So these 2, I'm going to focus on these 2 girls that were my biggest, best friends, I guess. They ended up doing some pretty horrible things to me that in hindsight, as an adult now, I'm like, wow, I put up with so much. One of them actually physically hurt me. She stabbed a pencil into my arm, and the lead stuck in my arm, and when I pulled it out, there was a lead mark in my arm, and that stayed there forever. In fact, it might even still be there, but there's a tattoo there now, so I can't see it anymore. But yeah, and she used to always like punch me, not in the face, but the arm, and she was mean to me, but at the same time, she was also the one that we'd have sleepovers together. Well, I had sleepovers with the other girl too, but we bonded over music. Basically, we all liked the same bands, and but there was like a disconnect there where when they started dating boys and I didn't, they started spending time with the boys, and they also started spending more time with more popular girls, which happened in my childhood too. I expected it. So I wasn't completely heartbroken about that because I kind of expected it at this point. So maybe the thing was I put up with the bullying because that was all I had. And some other things that they did to me, I didn't realize were bad until after the fact. So when we were 16, and I was the only person that was driving out of my friend group because my friends were younger than me. They were a grade at least younger. So they wanted me to drive them places. And of course, since I was a people pleaser and wanted everybody to like me, I just did it. I drove them wherever they needed to go. One time they said we're going to go, I don't remember what they told me now, but we ended up driving, and we were driving farther than I'd ever driven from the hometown that we grew up in. And I was like, where are we going? And she's like, just follow my directions. We'll get there. And I don't remember now where she said we were going. And I remember kind of worrying, like, we're getting really far away from town here. I was 16 years old, and I found myself an hour and a half away from my town. And when we got there, my two friends were kind of being weird with me and not telling me things I was asking. And I felt really used at the time, but it was too late because I was already there. They got out of the car and went into this house and told me to wait in the car. I kind of put two and two together after, I don't even know if I figured it out at that minute, but they were buying weed and they needed me to drive them there, and they wouldn't tell me ahead of time because they probably figured I would have said no. And I don't know if I would have said no or not, but whatever. So I had to, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, that was one example. Another example was also related to my car. I was at work and my friends came in and asked if they could borrow my car. They were just going to go down, hanging out with some friends down by the river, whatever. I'm like, fine, as long as you're back before I get off work. So they were gone, and they were still gone, and they were gone for 3 hours, 4 hours. It might have been 5 or 6 hours later. And they walk in and told me that my car was wrecked. I didn't understand at the time what they meant because they didn't know what happened to it. They just know that it stopped driving. They couldn't shift it into gear, and a bunch of green liquid came out of the bottom and landed on the ground, whatever. I still to this day don't know what that was. I think the transmission blew, but so when I was 16, I had no words for this. So this is one of the first times that I've ever talked about this because I haven't even told my parents that this is what really happened. I told them that it happened while I was driving. Because I didn't want them to get mad at me for letting my friends borrow my car. So, yeah, my friends wrecked my car. Well, the reason how it got wrecked, they told me later, was because they were driving up a really steep embankment that was not meant for a car. It was actually meant for four-wheelers and pickups. And my little car didn't stand a chance. So, that happened. So my friends were awful, like, abusing me. Oh, another thing they did was they knew that my house was unlocked after school because my parents were both at work and I would get home first. So one of these days that I was not home from school yet, when they had skipped out, because they were skippers, they were horrible influences on me. And I don't know how, I did never skip school because I felt like my dad would have just punished me too much. But so one of these days that I was not home yet, they showed up to my house and they knew that nobody was there, and they got in and through the unlocked door and stole a bunch of my tapes, my cassettes. Another thing that's dating me here because there are no cassettes anymore. So back in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, we had cassettes, and they stole them, and I don't know how they thought they'd get away with it, because I was always over at their houses and I'm like, hey, that's the exact cassette that I'm missing. Oh yeah, we just borrowed it. Okay, so they borrowed my cassettes and I took them back. But that was just another example of them not treating me well and me not having any choice in the matter, because they were my only friends. So that was my friendship experience in high school. Yeah, I guess I'll go on to the next category now, which is getting my first job. So, like anything else about becoming an adult, it was absolutely horrible for me. I didn't want to think about college or what I was going to do after school, after graduation, I should say. So I didn't do anything. I just kept on doing what I did. I just kept on. Well, I was still in high school when I was forced to get my first job, but my dad was the one that forced me to do that. And so I called McDonald's and I arranged an interview. And that was one of the worst calls I've ever had to make, because I am not a phone person. In fact, I say that I have a phone phobia because it still affects me. I'm probably going to do, yes, I am going to do another episode on this phone thing, because this is a really big subject. But it was very hard for me to make that phone call. And so anyway, I made the interview appointment and I went and got the job, because McDonald's hires anybody. And so, oh my gosh, I'm going to talk about how absolutely horrible my first week at that job was. I had to learn how to work the register, the cash register, and I can't even put into words how awful that was for so many reasons. Number one, I hated the fact that I had to spend time doing something I didn't want to do. Like, I was just thinking to myself, oh, here I am at this restaurant taking orders from strangers and struggling with this cash register when I could be home listening to music. That was pretty much all I thought about, was how I just didn't want to be there. And to make it worse, it was not easy. In fact, well, it was so not easy, I couldn't do it. I literally could not do it. I needed to ask for help constantly because I couldn't understand their instructions, which were verbal instructions are hard for autistic people. We need to have written instructions, but it wasn't just that. It was also, talking to strangers, talking to the public and customers. And that was the first time in my life that I'd ever been forced to do that. And I hated it already. And meeting new people and being in school and having to talk to kids and teachers and stuff. I just wanted to be in my safe little bubble. So being forced to be away from home, doing something I didn't want to do, talking to strangers, dealing with money, which was another one of the reasons why I was so horrible at that job. I couldn't count money because I'm horrible with numbers. In fact, I recently learned that there is a autistic condition. I don't remember the name of it. I think it's called calculalia, something like that, where you basically, numbers are hard. And I haven't really studied enough about that. I just read the word yesterday, so I'm going to have to learn some more about that. But it's basically not being able to work with numbers. And so counting money's always been hard for me. So remembering what people would order and trying to find the right button on the cash register. I'm struggling with words to describe how horrible this was. But I lasted a week, and at the end of the week, my manager said, okay, clearly you cannot do this. We've never had this happen before. Everybody usually gets the hang of it by a week, but you're not. And so rather than firing me, they just told me if I wanted to, I could just work back in the grill area all the time. And I was so relieved when they said that, because yeah, that worked out fine. So I did that, and I was really good at it. In fact, my manager a couple years later, I was still working there, he told me, this made me feel so good. This was one of the few compliments I ever got. But he actually said, even though I was absolute rubbish at the cash register, I ended up being one of the best grill workers that he'd ever seen. And looking back now, I think that was because, it was a good fit for me. It was a good place for me to be, not dealing with customers, not dealing with numbers, not having to remember the methods of how to do the, taking orders. I was just never good with that. And so being in the back was easy and fun, and I liked it. And I ended up staying at that job for 5 years, and only left because we needed a day off to go to a concert, and they said that me and my friend didn't ask for the right day off, so we were both fired. But honestly, we didn't give a crap at the time, because we both had other jobs by then. So I did have another job at the same time. When I turned 19, I got this second job, which was full-time. And here's how that played out. So, I had been working at McDonald's since I was 16, so that was, I can't do math, I gotta count on my fingers, 17, 18, 3 years that I worked at McDonald's alone, just nothing but McDonald's. And of course, this was how I did things in life. I didn't do more than I had to. After the struggle of doing the interview and going through that week of hell, I'm like, oh my God, I just wanted to relax and settle into this routine and just not do anything else. So yeah, for 3 years, I worked part-time at McDonald's. And even after I graduated, I had no intention of doing anything else. My dad was like, I have arranged an interview for you at the factory. There's this factory he worked at. He was a supervisor there. And he basically arranged the interview for me since he knew the owner and forced me to go. I had no choice in the matter. So that was awful too, because that was another time in my life where I thought, I'm fine. Why do I need to do this? Why do I have to? Why? And I know this sounds like a toddler asking why all the time, but this is a big thing for autistic people. We need to know why something is before we can jump into it, before we feel safe and comfortable doing it. So yeah, I don't know. There was no answer to my question. This is just what adults do. So I went and got the job, of course, because I was his daughter and he was a supervisor there. So this was a factory that made paper products, like filing products, folders, and things like that. And my first day, I had to do this horrible, monotonous job of walking around a table in circles and grabbing a piece of paper off of different stacks of different pieces of paper and putting them in order. And literally that's all I did, was walked around this table grabbing these papers and putting them in order and then putting them on a pallet. And I had never touched paper so many times in my life in one day. It was so bad that I got paper cuts. My whole entire hands were covered in paper cuts. Day one. I'm like, what? This is what I have to do every day? It hurt. My legs were sore. And it was full time. So I'm like, oh my God, 8 hours every day I have to do this. So, and then also the other bad thing, there's so many bad things about this job, but this is basically what factories are like. There are bright fluorescent lights, loud noises from all these machines running, open spaces, basically all three things that are horrible for my sensory, my hypersensitivity. At the time, of course, I had no idea that I was hypersensitive. I had no idea I was autistic and that these things would bother me. So I just did it because I had to. And I just remember having all of these thoughts like, this is the rest of my life. This is what I have to do every day for the rest of my life, is stand under these bright lights and be around all these loud noises and be on my feet all day and have sore feet and have paper cuts on my hands and just all of these new people. There was over 1,000 people at this job. I want to say there was 1,200, 1,500, like some massive amount of people. Because this actually was like the biggest employer in my town. And my town was like 30,000 people. So there was a huge amount. People even drove from the neighboring state over to work at this job. It was the best job, apparently, because all the adults were like, oh, look at all the benefits we get and look at the pay we get and the work is actually easy and oh, everybody just flocked to this job. Meanwhile, I'm 19 years old going, why? Why do I have to do this? I don't want to do this. Ugh. Yeah, I had more money than I had working at McDonald's, but I also could not be happy. I thought, this is life. This is what life is just spending most of my day, most of my week, until I'm 65 years old or whatever, doing stuff I don't want to do. So yeah, so this factory had many, 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 many different jobs within it. And it wasn't always just walking around a table grabbing pieces of paper. There was also machines that I was taught how to operate, which sucked as well. But there was variety, I will say that. And so if I hated a certain job there, I didn't have to do it every single day, but I had to do something there every day. And I would say out of all the different positions there that I had, I probably really enjoyed maybe 3 or 4 of them out of maybe 30. Which was not good odds, not good ratio there. So I stayed at this job because as an autistic person, without knowing it, of course, I did not have any motivation. Well, I should have had motivation. I hated it, but I didn't have anything pushing me to do anything else, because my dad was always the one that pushed me to do things that I had to do. And if he wanted me to work here, I knew that I didn't have to do anything else. This was it. No more job interviews, no more learning new jobs that I hated. It was, I'm getting money, I have benefits. It was nice because both my parents actually worked there. So, it felt safe, I got comfortable there. Like I said, there was a couple positions there that I liked, and that, basically I fell into a routine of comfortableness, and routines are really big to autistic people. So I liked the hours that I worked. I worked 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Not that I wanted to work 8 hours, but I liked the fact that I could sleep in every day, because I was a night owl. At the time, I didn't know it, but I actually had delayed sleep phase disorder, which is common with autistic people. But I did not know it at the time. All I knew was that I couldn't get up in the mornings. And so it was nice being able to wake up at noon, have some time to eat breakfast at noon, and then go to work at 3, and then get home in time to listen to music. Pretty much what I did, and there's not much else to do at 11 p.m. And back then there was no internet, so I got home, listened to music, and that was my life. And so I stayed at that job for 18 years. And the only reason I left that job was because they downsized. Now, this was jumping ahead, of course, to 1991. Oh, no, I'm so bad with numbers. I can't even remember what year it was. 2018, maybe. No, that doesn't sound right either. Honestly, I have no... This is how bad I am with numbers. Okay, so 18 years after 1991. I'm not going to do the math. But this was when businesses were starting to pay overseas workers more money to do the job. And so they ended up laying off more people, sending a lot of their business to Mexico, laying off more people. Eventually they got to me and I got laid off. So I'm not going to keep talking about that subject because I really wanted this episode to focus on what it was like being a teenager for me. And since I started that job as a teenager, I just wanted to go deep into my feelings on it. Basically, my feelings about work were just awful. I hate this. Why do I have to do this? And believe me, I'm going to go more into depth with this work thing in another episode because this is such a huge subject that it might actually require 2 episodes. So, yeah, I'm going to end this one now. We're at 40 minutes in, so I hope that this gave you a good indication of what it's like for an autistic female to go through her teenage years. And I didn't even cover the whole thing of turning into a woman because honestly, that didn't really bother me. That was the one thing that I was kind of excited about was, getting my period and all that stuff. Of course, that happened when I was 12 or 13, but I never had an issue with that, although it did make for some extremely embarrassing moments. But this is not the podcast for that. And in fact, I'm probably not going to talk about that again. It wasn't an issue. I mean, it was just whatever. So those were my awkward teenage years of not knowing I was autistic and learning how to be an adult, which now that I'm 50 years old, I gotta say, it's never gets easier. I struggled with it then. I struggle with it now. I don't even know if I can call myself a real adult. As well intentioned as my dad was to get me on the right foot in life, it wasn't his fault, really, because he didn't know I was autistic. And these are struggles that we're going to have for our whole lives, and it's not like anybody can override them. So basically, people that try to help autistic people in, these areas, they're going to fail. Because you can't just force somebody to become the model adult. And that's what my dad was trying to do. He wanted me to have a good job. He wanted me to not be lazy. He wanted me to get good grades in school. Sure, I had the job, but that's because I had to. I was living, with my parents. And I had to have a job to, whatever. I'm going to stop this episode now because there's really nothing more I can say. I feel like I'm talking in circles here. So thank you for listening, and I hope this episode was helpful for you. And hopefully we will see you again in the next episode.